Infatti si chiamava Pallanullini.
However, you got one bed, right? One big bed?
One big bed.
Yeah, I also have one big bed, so we can only do it if there are separate beds. Rooms with separate beds.
Yeah, maybe because I'm on the seaside. Then it would be cheaper to do a seaside room and share. However, right.
Stato nazionale italiano. Sta su Wikipedia. È uno zio.
On our newsletter list? Yeah?
Nee, absolut. Es ist immer Gelato-Zeit.
Sort of make our day zero, and when it is possible to invite.
Do you have time to tell this to all right now?
So let's continue. We are already 9 minutes after the hour, and the discussion in the morning was really joyful and enlightening for us, and over lunch it continued, and some great ideas have already emerged, and Mattia Fantinati just came up with a great proposal that I would like him to share with all of you. Anyone seen where the mic is?
Yeah.
Okay. So Mattia, if you would just share the idea so then everyone is informed about what's possibly going to
if you don't mind,
happen.
I came here, so it's
Absolutely.
I think that everything that we do here is, I think that the best opportunities that we have is to share with the policymaker. And so I think it could be suitable that it's possible to invite all the Ministry of the Digitalization, e-government, digital agenda, whatever, in a sort of a day zero before the event. So I think that we can choose one point to discuss among them. In a sort of way, we could report the day later in the EuroDIG what came out from this discussion, or whatever. I'm here to hear from you some suggestion, and it really would be great. I think that it could be a marvelous opportunity to make connected the policymakers and the EuroDIG and the association, organization, and the citizen.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah. About that.
Yes, I didn't say that it's a new idea. It's just
I think that's a very good idea, and it would really add a lot of value to EuroDIG, and if we can make that happen, that would be perfect.
Just sorry, another. I don't know how we can organize. I don't know how we can organize, but if I share with you my email, maybe you can write down the name of the ministry of your own country government, so you can write down who is maybe the best person that could be involved, because we know that digitalization in internet governments is split and divided in a lot of topics and a lot of ministries. So if we can arrange a sort of internet discussion about who can be the best person in your government, that it could be a minister or a secretary of state, undersecretaries, I think you are the best person who really knows your government structure. Mm-hmm. If I can leave my email address, I'm leaving some my business card, so who doesn't have it yet can bring it one. Mm-hmm. Thank you really, but I cannot stay here any longer, and I would like to thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you for coming and for joining and for making this great offer. Okay, then I suggest we continue where we stopped. In the morning, I just have to bring up the presentation.
Some business card here.
Rainer, could you give me hosting rights? Or do I have them? I'm not even connected anymore. Join the meeting. Okay, I just have to reconnect. Here we are. Okay, when we look at the categories, so we went through the security and crime category, we went through technical and operational issues, and we went through development of the internet governance ecosystem. We still have left access and literacy, human rights, innovation, economic issues, media and content, and then there are some cross-cutting and other issues, but this is not the majority. I would suggest we start with access and literacy for two reasons. First of all, we touched on these issues already a little bit in our previous discussions, and secondly, access and literacy in particular is of focus for our host organizations, for ICTP. And therefore, I would like to ask Frederick or Sharon, whoever is assigned to do this. ISOC.
That would be you, Sharon.
Okay, ISOC was the subject matter expert on this category. The mic? It's here, Sharon. And I bring up again the matrix, so you might use that for going through the category if you like, Sharon.
Yes, thank you, Sandra. So we had 19 proposals. We had community networks, and then we had capacity building and rural internet access. I clustered them separately because the ones under community networks, 23, 33, 91, and probably with the addition of Ramon's proposal 94, it was more focused on best practices. They were dealing with policy challenges and etc. And the rest, capacity building and rural internet access, it was more building skills, sustainability issues, and general capacity building activities. That's why I put them separately, but they might work well under a workshop, the same workshop, so they can discuss all aspects. And then we had digital inclusion and building digital skills and building digital literacy curricula. We had some repetitive proposals, so many people came up with more or less the same substance. So I think in this other workshop, I think they would work well together, because there was a repetition. And now you put 5G governance under access as well. I understand this is a very big priority for our host. So it will be in their hands, and I'm pretty sure the community networks as a workshop would work well. I would have suggested maybe having a plenary just focusing on community networks and then a follow-up workshop, but this would work also well in a single workshop item. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Any comments? How is it right? Rose?
Ross.
Ross, okay.
Ross. Ross from Etno, the telecommunications operators. Firstly, we were very pleased to see that 5G is such a priority. We looked at the different elements of what would be in this plenary based on the proposals. And in fact, we didn't propose any 5G related to access and literacy. That said, some of the elements of this 5G plenary do touch on the negative. 5G is a much bigger story than its problems. So looking at what's here, we have EMF, sovereign identity, 5G and digital sovereignty, usage scenarios, but that element of usage scenarios seem to not be so much about the opportunities of the verticals, but rather more negative governance implications. So we would quite like to see a broader debate. Maybe the word governance is restrictive, but a broader debate absolutely looking at the challenges, but also the opportunities. Following on from what was discussed last year, there was a workshop on regulation in the internet economy, how to create the right building blocks for 5G networks. It's an incredibly positive narrative looking at the underlying infrastructure. So I think both elements need to be there. Absolutely the problems need to be discussed, but so do the opportunities. And if I may, just to, of course we did propose something on 5G, and what that means for prosperity in Europe. That was put into another bucket on the European digital economy regulation. Looking at the other topics in that bucket, they're very broad, blockchain, etc. So if a more balanced narrative were to come into the access and literacy plenary in 5G, I think that would give as I say, a much more balanced approach. That's our view.
Thank you very much. As you said, I mean, none of the proposals under the 5G plenary were suggested under access and literacy. So this was a discretion of the Secretariat. And I also think it would be good to, what was the number of your proposal, if you don't mind, to be discussed under this? So you suggest something more focusing on 64. So challenges and opportunities raised by 5G would be, and you should definitely obviously become a member of the org team, or just suggesting.
Just to add why we did it, why we did propose it under access, the 5G issue, we referred to the discussion we had on various other occasions, like also the planning, the kickoff meeting in September that we had in Trieste when this issue of 5G was discussed, and the meeting with the partners in Berlin at the IGF. And since no proposal came into that, we took that also into consideration, what has been discussed on these occasions, and said that might be an opportunity. Why we put community networks in a workshop, we remember we had 2 years ago in Georgia a plenary about this, and it might be, we thought it might be a good idea to follow up with a workshop on how these projects worked, in particular the Tusheti project, where also ISOC played a big role. And a second project like this is also underway in Georgia as well. And I think there are, in particular, we have a lot of, not a lot of, but we had some very interesting, at least two or three, Rainer, from the Italian regional governments on how they can connect in alpine areas and so on and so forth. And we thought bringing those experiences from Georgia and the discussions together with the questions and the concepts that are dealt with in Italy, for instance, and then also possibly are of great interest for countries from Southeastern European countries, might be better dealt with in a workshop. That was our rationale behind.
No, it's, I mean, it's especially with the suggested program schedule, I think that will work.
Okay, Frederick?
Yes, Giacomo, just very quickly. As I said a few hours before, it's very well depend on where we do organize it. So when in Georgia, you're right, it was about sharing the experience of Tusheti, and the Georgians wanted to push for this. Here, I believe there is some maturity in the topic, meaning that there are now more and more, even European Union, awareness of the regulatory and policy issues. While when we start discussing about that, it was just development and capacity building. So that would be the reason why we would suggest to have this in a twofold way, a policy and regulatory, because there will be many more people who would like to discuss this. Even from our understanding in the European Union, they try to adapt their legislations to this kind of new way to launch broadband, and by the way, for ethno, including 5G. And then the capacity building and the exchange of best practices, while we have here next to me many experts of community network and infrastructure. So that's why we would suggest to go in a twofold way. That was the reasoning behind it.
Question for clarification, would that mean community networks could possibly 2 workshops follow up each other? Is that something that you would suggest? Like one is looking into regular
We
approaches?
open to conversation. We believe that if we have policymakers who want to discuss regulatory and policy issues, a plenary might be interesting, provided we have the traction, or to workshop indeed, because there are really two different angles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We now have
on this.
yes, Giacomo, then Olivier, right? Anyone else who raised a hand that I missed? Have we someone online? No? Okay, then Giacomo and then Olivier.
Yeah,
please.
just because you mentioned Italy. In Italy, the approach is different, is to serve the rural areas through investments that are made directly by state-owned or companies that are with private participation, and not necessarily through the 5G. So I think that if the accent is on rural areas, it doesn't matter if it are community networks or not, but how you serve rural areas, because this is a problem that applies to all the country, and the solution could be different from one country to another. Why, if you say only community networks in rural area, you are already selecting only one of the possible approach. And for instance, it's not the one that is followed in Italy. Why you mention Italy?
Thank you. I haven't read the 5G proposals, so I wanted to go back to 5G, but I've reviewed the innovation and economic issues topics, and there's one about smart cities. And my feeling is that smart cities is enabled by 5G. It's very difficult to have a smart city without having a network to sustain it. And so I'm not quite sure whether one could also add smart cities to this. And that includes 4 proposals. There's got IoT and AI, IoT market and development, securing smart cities, and promoting smart cities and digital transportation development in Southeastern Europe and EU. Would that fit together in a plenary? With what there is at the moment in 5G?
I think.
Yeah, so add the smart cities to 5G so that we've got a positive thing about 5G and not just dangers of 5G and it will fry your brains and you'll never be able to get out ever again or something, I don't know.
I think the big question here is on 5G, on what aspect to focus on.
Yeah, that's
there are a lot of proposals that could somehow fit under it, and I think here we really have to define what is the focus. And here I would maybe ask our host, what would you consider a focus? Because we had some discussion in the forefront already. Are you able to?
In the same direction. 5G is being discussed together with sovereignty. And I don't think we should repeat this discussion under 5G, but put it under sovereignty. So we should try to focus the discussion on 5G and put things that overlap to only one of the workshops, and here to the other workshop on digital sovereignty.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I do agree with Giacomo about the, extending connectivity, and, for example, discussion about TV white space could be of interest from the European point of view. And that could be a way to, extend connectivity. So not focusing only on 5G, but making it broader in a way. And I'm not really sure about smart cities. I mean, the smart cities, deployments right now are not based on 5G. Are based on other technologies, so I'm not really sure it fits in the 5G plenary. Yeah.
And also the reason that the cluster was made this way, because we had like 4 proposals directly using the term community networks, and then in all of them it was rural areas, so this was coming from the community. So maybe under 5G, this connectivity issues, alternative ways might also be discussed.
Just for understanding, for clarification, so community networks regulatory framework might go under 5G, is that what I get?
No.
No.
I don't think so.
So.
I believe I might actually some people go confused because I might be the cause of us discussing now 5G and CN because I've read recently some paper that try to demonstrate that you could also promote 5G through community networks, which is quite new. And I wanted to drop this, for Ethno with a little smile. But that was not the point, actually. It's me bragging about that. But there is no intention to discuss 5G in community networks altogether at all. Not at all.
So we are basically still with 5G governance. There's at the moment no opposition on this. Okay. First a remote participant, then Roberto.
Andrew, please take the floor.
Thank you. On the 5G governance, as it's listed under access and literacy, somebody sort of touched on some of the myths around 5G and the bad things it can supposedly do. I think it'd be a fantastic opportunity to dispel some of those myths in this session and actually show what the real science is. Because a lot of the myths on the internet keep referring back to some fairly poor papers. So to have some current documentation that actually sort of says why that's wrong would be helpful to touch on, not to make a big focus of a session, but it would be helpful to have something there as a reference point.
Yeah, I see that some of the proposals on 5G touch on digital sovereignty. My personal opinion is that if we talk about 5G, we shouldn't forget about the elephant in the room. That is the question about how the Chinese technology is going to be accepted or not, influenced by certain political decisions. For instance, the push to excluding Huawei from developing infrastructure in Europe, and that by the time we get to June, this is going to be a hot topic. At least in Italy, it's going to be so. And I assume in the rest of Europe. So we should take into account this aspect that is going to come up by then.
I think it was you, Roberto, but also someone else. How internet is impacted by East-West relationships. Is this what you meant with this proposal when you made it?
No. East-West is a different thing. I think the where it's located is fine. I'm just mentioning the fact that the deployment of 5G is a serious issue that has political consequences. The moment that like, for instance, I'm just making an example. The Chinese are proposing to work in the infrastructure in connection with what they do with the port of Trieste as the end of the Belt and Road Initiative to build a 5G infrastructure. The question is that the government is a little bit hesitant on this, and there's a lot of pushback because of the concerns that come from the US, from the Trump administration about not allowing Huawei to develop to sell their infrastructure in Europe because of security concerns and the possible backdoors that they can build in and so on. I think this is, we cannot have possibly, in my personal opinion, a workshop in June without having a discussion on this topic. It's just, if it's not explicitly, I don't know what Valentina wants to to put as topic in terms of digital sovereignty, but I see this as a political issue.
I don't want to have the monopoly of digital sovereignty now, but no, actually, I propose the 5G and digital sovereignty issue, and this was precisely my focus. Although I cannot point fingers, so I cannot say Huawei. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely an element that we should discuss. I don't know whether under the 5G plenary or under the digital sovereignty plenary. That's I mean, up to us all to decide. But in any case, it would come out in either one or probably in both. These non-European providers of infrastructure entering the European market, and if we allow such a deployment of the entire network to them, and what are the consequences, etc., etc. What he was saying, the backdoor and blah, 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 blah.
No? Okay. Any other comments at this stage? Because then I would have a question or a proposal. Since it is at the moment proposed as a plenary, we usually have that opportunity before a plenary to have, yeah, gleich. We always have the opportunity before a plenary to have a keynote or a 30-minute slot, something. We could invite two different views, one in favor and one against, giving argument against, giving arguments in favor, and then have the discussion about 5G. Would that be an opportunity, which is also kind of a keynoting thing, but does not necessarily have to be from a highly political person, but can also be from an expert person? Is that something which we could include, this East-West elephant in the room, Huawei kind of thing? Okay, I see nodding. I see Giacomo, but first we have Gonzalo from Telefonica who raised a hand. Gonzalo, great you can make it. You have the
Hello, yes. Yes, I just wanted to mention that given the wide range of topics that we're going to discuss in the 5G session plenary, maybe including the smart cities proposals would be too optimistic, and probably, I mean, we would not be able to address all the issues. So my suggestion would be to keep the smart cities on a separate session.
Okay, thank you. I give the floor to Giacomo.
Thanks. I think that the Huawei issue is a very highly political issue. So if you bring expert, what the expert can say, it's a political decision at the end of the day. So if we want to touch really this point that requires a certain ability to find the right people, has to be government. We have government in Europe that say that they don't see any problem, and countries that say that they see a problem. So ideally, you have to bring one representing that political camp and the other one representing the other political camp, and put them together in discussing. But this needs some government's help this needs some institutional and political level intervention to convince the people to come. No, not the Commission, of course, but I see there are countries that they say that they don't see any problem, and others that they see a big problem. So we need these people. As an expert, what will an expert add to the... Eventually you can have a third person that could, or a journalist that could moderate the two interventions, raising the right question, but it's a political issue.
Okay. Jon?
Well, I think since it's so politicized, this issue, it makes sense to have a more technical expert explaining the real issues behind. And then we can have, of course, the other side represented in the plenary. So one could make a point in a keynote, and then we should make sure that in the plenary we have the other side represented as well.
I see this coming. I see this coming up as a, as Giacomo said, highly political issue, and whoever is going to be the focal point for this session has to deal with it. Full stop. And you might remember that our approach this year would also be that we organize the plenaries a little bit more top-down, that we don't give it to the broader community to do. So possibly the focal point role for any of the plenaries, including this one, would stay either with the host or with any of the partner organizations. And since we are alerted now and are all aware of the issues, I hope this will be in good hands. And for the moment, I just put under this plenary, including 1 or 2 statements about deploying companies, which is a very vague thing, but possibly this reminds us on what we would like to achieve, inviting high-level people with one view and the other view, and then leading to a plenary. Marco and Armando, is this still going into the direction that was important for you to deal with? Okay, and do you think that you as a host or any of your colleagues would have the capacity to deal with it as a focal point, or would you rather just stay in the backseat and be a participant? Second option, okay. Then I might look at Ethno, if Ethno is in the position to maybe take the focal point role on this one?
It's a capacity question at the moment. I can't speak for the office, I can't give a definitive answer, but there is a capacity question at the moment.
But that has to be discussed. It's
has
not
to be
yet
discussed,
decided.
yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so let's put that aside, but keep it in mind. Yeah. Whoever else, maybe ISOC has an interest in taking the lead on this, just let us know, because this is a hot topic and that might end up being the opening plenary. So, although we won't call it opening plenary in case we have only men sitting. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Any other general remarks on this category, access? And there's another word, literacy, and there's one part on literacy which, if I share my personal point of view, the proposals that went in there are not the strongest ones, I must say. This is a lot of things that we have discussed already, anyway, we clustered it, but if you have to make if you have to take a decision and we have to take some things out, then this is possibly one where we are not losing strong proposals. Please, ISOC team, correct me if I'm wrong, but
I think at this point we should leave it. We might.
Mike,
the mic, please.
What is it?
What?
Oh, thank you. I think we need a very strong focal point for this to make sure. Personally, I wouldn't like to remove some of the proposals, because then again it's hard to pick, because it's all more or less touching the same issue. So a very strong focal point that might direct the discussion into something more refreshing and we haven't heard before. And of course we can be in close contact.
Adding to that we still have a bucket that is being called access and literacy. So it would be so unfair if we just skip the literacy part of this bucket. It's too late. We can keep that in mind and see in the coming years whether we maintain this, but for the time being it would be unfair to remove it. Now we can do what we want, but I agree that the 3 others are stronger, much stronger in terms, including in policy and governance. Yeah, that's clear.
But I would like to remind us, the point is, and we agree that we would like to be a little bit more focused. In the past we tried to include each and every proposal. This year we take the liberty to say it's repetitive. It has been discussed. It's not so strong this year. Maybe it's stronger in another year. Let's keep it out for a while. We only have a limited slots available, and at the moment we have like 3 or 4, even 5 more than available. So let's keep that in mind. We have to take some hard decisions today in this respect.
I agree, but so sorry, I'm a bit stubborn. Even though it would depend on me, I would just feel okay if we would skip that part. But we don't address literacy unless we address literacy in the proposal we have. So I believe we can give it a secondary kind of situation with a one shot or a D0 or something at 7:30 a.m. Or I hope I'm not taped, but it's in, and this is only literacy that we have. So I guess.
Okay, Jan.
Regarding literacy, I think we have a literacy topic buried somewhere else, and I had a cluster of protection of data relating to children and how to educate, and there is a line going from human rights and data protection to innovation and economic issues. And I think there is a literacy issue on children, that we don't just want to exclude everything that relates to children, but how to educate them, how to empower them, that they can participate, and then they can do it in a way that suits their abilities. So maybe we could move this to literacy, and then we have a literacy part as well.
This brings me to an idea. Indeed, there is an arrow from protection of data relating to children and how to educate to basically not economy, but the arrow should lead to aspects of social media, vulnerable groups, children and old people, which kind of is a broader literacy topic. But then there were some proposals that were quite interesting that went into the direction of building curriculums for blockchain, building curriculums for XYZ. Maybe this could cover the entire literacy thing in a more specific and more focused way. And there was one proposal that came from the Portuguese government, and I know they are doing some great work on this. They called it, it's here, a cybersecurity classroom for kids from the Portuguese government, and there was another, I think this was under, oops, that was too far. I have to see where we, huh?
26, I think, related to cybersecurity. Part of the curriculum.
We definitely had some more proposals. Here it is, under other. Development of an educational curricula, which is kind of, so we could possibly have a presentation from something like somebody like the Portuguese government. They possibly have to share something about what they are doing, and then maybe feed that all into a educational literacy session. Is that a, okay, Frederick agrees. I see others nodding in the room as well.
Isn't that the typical day zero? Sorry. Isn't that the typical day zero sort of session that we do?
We moved it too often already to day zero. This looks always a little
because we always do that. That's why I remember
not always,
it this way.
but we did it in the past. So.
No, then that's very good, especially if it's practical with someone presenting what they do, like the Portuguese government apparently. Then it's a different session, no, than the usual.
Basically, the connection was already made by the Secretariat, and I just realized this now. Exactly, and then have maybe a flash or a presentation in the plenary room, and then go into a workshop to discuss it a little bit more in details, these curriculums. Okay, I think that's a very good solution. So we keep this and merge it with the other one from the curriculums.
Including the 153 and...
We go into the details then later on. Rainer, do we have comments from remote participants? Not at this moment.
Not at this moment.
Okay, then I summarize this category access. We confirm the plenary on G5. We are aware of the political questions that attached to this. It will somehow also connect to the digital sovereignty, so we have to make that clear in the program that we have that close to each other. We have at the moment proposed 2 workshops on network community networks, one that talks about regulatory frameworks and one that talks about best practices. We will see if we can really accommodate 2 workshops, but then there should be a follow-up. And we have merged building digital skills, and there was nothing as a typical standalone topic. I think we are pretty much in agreement how we deal with this category, aren't we? Perfect. Then I would suggest, since we touched it already, going now to the innovation and economic issues category, then to human rights, and then to media and content.
Just a short intervention. People in the chat says they need to hear what is discussed in the room. So please use the microphone.
Good point, Rainer. Olivier, you are a subject matter expert for a while, but you did this category this year for the first time. So the floor is yours. Where is the mic?
Very important category.
All right, thanks. So, yeah, I tried my hand this year on something else, and now for something completely different. And we actually swapped roles with the Internet Society and with Frederic and with Cherin. So I used to do access and literacy, and now dealing with innovation, new things. And so the clustering was actually quite interesting in that there were a lot of submissions in that category. I think was it 37 or something. It's quite a large number. And as time went on, I also saw that a number of other submissions that had originally been classed elsewhere ended up in innovation. The largest cluster was to do with the European digital economy and regulation relating to this. You might have remembered last year there was some poll that was put in during EuroDIG, and there were quite a few people that had said they were interested in more regulation in Europe rather than less regulation in Europe among the participants. So it's interesting that there was a follow-up on this with a large number of submissions that dealt with regulation. And so they and I think it's quite correct to put this as a plenary, the European digital economy, all around regulation, and also linking it, if you look at the screen, the suggestion of linking it with efficient regulation of global platforms. And this is a huge, huge topic. And you can see how many proposals are there. This is going to be, but I think that as a plenary, it will have to be structured in a way that we don't just mix all the things together, but at the same time aim towards some deliverables that can probably come out of that. So I'm quite looking forward to this. Having it as plenary too. You will have noticed on the diagram on the left-hand side the smart cities, which I tried earlier to hook to the 5G, but that's been refused now. So I'll go back to my corner and keep the smart cities to ourselves. A number of proposals came into this. They were like somehow linked. I mean, part of the smart cities thing is to do with. I know there was one proposal which spoke about smart cities, not just reserved for cities, but pretty much for smaller towns as well, smaller locations. But I think that it might be worth looking at it as a workshop or maybe a flash session or something that could incorporate in that the workshops which I mentioned here. So IoT and AI, the IoT market, securing smart cities and promoting smart cities and digital transportation. Because there's somehow IoT, smart cities and AI are interrelated with this. It might well be that it would work in maybe access, but we'll have to look at that a bit further. The algorithms was interesting. Algorithms, competition and trust. There were a number of proposals this year on this. Again, it touches with calls for some people to say, oh, well, algorithms should be regulated. So, we're dealing with, of course, recognizing you, tracking you on the internet, and it's got a high component with regards to privacy as well. But this would probably fit very well as a workshop. We had last year a workshop on algorithms, which was more of a educational thing. But this year we really are looking more at the inner workings of how algorithms promote or do not promote competition, or promote or do not promote trust in the internet. I think that a lot of people are starting to really wonder why the internet is tracking them so closely. So it does have a very high component part of privacy and data governance in some way. Then if you scroll a bit further to the right, you'll find there were a few workshops that were proposed, few topics that were proposed that were somehow isolated. First, I clustered some on emerging technologies. The number one actually focuses on artificial intelligence. How do we deal with the place of the human brain functions, power, and existence within a sustainable internet with IoT and AI? And the second one, I think, was just added on. That wasn't one of the workshops that I reviewed, which was what is the status of computer interaction development for the disabled with easy access, including costs for humans disadvantaged by impediments to sight, hearing, speech, and mobility. I think that would be more with access and literacy, and maybe we should look at seeing if we can tag it along with one existing topical workshop. The one which focuses on AI could easily be folded into the smart cities thing, because that's all a component part on it. There were two proposals on innovative uses of blockchain and cryptography. I know that blockchain actually was one of the topics that the local, was it the local host or the government said that there was interest in that. So I'm not sure where we're going with regards to the blockchain topic and whether any of the other groups had anything to do with blockchain technologies. In response to the request, well, not the request, but the note that was made this morning about the societal effects of some aspects of the internet, internet addiction was actually proposed by Auke, who has moved back now, hidden behind me. And that's interesting because, yes, that's a certain thing. I'm not sure that we're addicted to the internet, but I've certainly noticed in younger generations much internet addiction. In fact, social media addiction. You might have seen, you are? But I haven't seen you walk around like the usual social media addict, which is a person that walks at about 1 kilometer an hour, just looking at their phone and about to cross the street. And by the way, I've seen that many times. I mean, you must have seen this in large cities. And it's really a concern. And you think, well, you know, it's a joke, isn't it? But it isn't actually. They're very much addicted to their phone. And when you see the number of people that turn up at these social influencers on YouTube, events or flash events. They used to call them flash events back then, flash crowds and so on. Then one really has to be concerned about this. I would think that internet addiction might be a good flash session because it's one of these things that needs to be addressed. It's an upcoming issue and it's only likely to become worse with time. And then women in technology and the gender gap is important. I note that here, yes, there is not that much balance. And in wider technology issues or internet issues, we'll find that 90% of the time we've got so many male panels and not enough balanced panels. So I would have thought this could be also a good flash session, since the flash sessions are taking place in the main hall, so they would get the recognition that it deserves, and hopefully we can get a what is it called? Is it a WANL? Women only panel. So if you got a manel, you got a WANL. Anyway, so that's those are the current clusters, and I'm happy to discuss any of these. And I guess maybe the first question is really, can we cluster efficient regulation of global platforms with the European digital economy regulation?
That would have been my question to you as well, if you feel comfortable with those.
I feel pretty comfortable about that. I mean, that's going to be a huge topic. We need to make sure that the people that are going to speak are going to be good with not rambling on about things. So basically, totally excludes me from speaking on this thing. But you know, it needs to be something that we can then look at the different component parts of each one of these proposals and plug them, and then have a what do you call it? Have a roadmap, if you want, that takes us through that topic.
Okay. Valentina?
No, I guess I understand where Olivier is coming from and why he wants to merge these two into a plenary. But maybe we need to clarify, because it looks very weird, the European digital economy regulation. Now, we already have many people that say that our only advantage is regulation, but put it this way, is very, very weird. Because it looks like our digital economy is regulation, which is not necessarily true, the European one. And the second, again, there are many people who already say that's our only economic advantage, but yeah, you know, let's not give this negative view on our digital economy. And the second point is then, I mean, on the other side, efficient regulation of global platforms, I'm guessing people who put this workshop proposal, I mean, this call for this issue, are not talking about European platform either. So it's a bit, we need to clarify, I mean, we need to think about a smart title for this plenary to include all these elements, because there are a lot of elements there.
Valentina, just to touch what you say, it's not only regulation. Olivier clustered it in a way that he said European digital economy, A, regulation, and B, promotion. Yeah. And we just, it's not there anymore because the Secretariat dissolved the promotion part because those proposals were not so strong. We put them into other sessions.
There we have an answer to what I said. Yeah, precisely. I mean, we think that our only competitive advantage is regulation, but that's wrong. Yeah. Let's try to, promote better or more.
Again, we have to see what we get and what is more stronger. There's things that were not so strong, we try to put them in other fields.
No, I mean, I tend to agree, but we need to find a smart title for that. But it's supposed to be a very interesting plenary.
A lot, for instance, went into the Southeastern European, that comes later when we talk to about the category human rights. A lot of those promotional things went into into this one.
It's actually an interesting development from, I think, I mean, I didn't write any of those proposals, but it's an interesting development from what President Macron was saying at the IGF in Paris, which was you've got the Californian internet, like you can do anything you want. And you got the Chinese internet, which is completely 100% run by the government, effectively. And then you've got the European internet, which should find itself somewhere in between the two. And it's funny because for the US, of course, the Californian internet works really well because, of course, they got the GAFAs. They've got the biggest companies out there, and they do not want to put any kind of regulation on them because these companies are bringing an enormous amount of cash worldwide. But the Europeans are seeing these companies as a potential threat, and this is why regulation was seen last year as being something that there needed to be with regards to platforms, with regards to content, with regards to these things. So I think we can probably, we have to find a title, but if we can find a nice balance on this and have a frank discussion on that, that would be a good idea.
By the way, California just did do some regulations
privacy,
on the GAFAs.
Yes, privacy. Which copycat what? The GDP. Just saying. No, and I had another point on this, which was that though I'm very interested in these three plenary, 5G, digital sovereignty, and the last one with the smart title, and I think they're crucial for the future of Europe, we risk to have three very similar plenary, or in any case, the issue raised will be relatively similar in the three. I'm just throwing this there. Huh?
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have two hand raised from remote participants. Rainer, can you give them the floor, please?
Andrew, please go first.
Surely, thank you. Well, just to pick up on the last point, I think that the structure as proposed looks really good. I agree with the comment that there is some overlap potentially with the digital sovereignty, but I think as long as they're positioned clearly, that's a positive thing, because I think digital sovereignty is the hot issue at the moment. So addressing it from sort of three different sort of points of view or three different facets of it is potentially quite a powerful thing to do. So as long as there's good sort of management of the three different sessions, that should work well and would be potentially a nice golden thread through the whole of the event. So I think that's a positive.
And Andrew, would you say that would provide a potential theme for this year?
Absolutely. And I think it should be, personally, because I think it's a hot topic at the moment, and it's Europe needs to make a decision fundamentally. Does it want to be an extension of the US internet, or fundamentally does it want to have a distinctive European internet that's interconnected with but separate from in terms of policy and privacy and all those things from the US? I think lots of the other issues come out of that, because things like 5G, for example, and Huawei, do you want to be a sort of a delivery agent for US trade policy and its trade war with China, or to take an independent line? There are pros and cons in both approaches. So I think it's a strong theme, and it's very much of the moment.
The next would be Andrea.
Thank you, Ryan. I think it's the same, it's due to the same name, but I do agree with Andrew very much on what he said. Actually, he picked up what I wanted to say. I think this is really the theme, and it's a theme that we have to be smart and put it onto the sovereignty and make come across what do we mean about sovereignty, and probably that could be even the challenge of the session, because it really touches upon different layers. And just to give you an idea on how things are moving fast, is what Olivier just mentioned, Macron's speech about the California internet and the European internet, the Chinese internet. That was 2 years ago. And you read the news and you see that the California internet actually is not that fancy any longer, not even in California. And you mentioned the GDPR-like regulation in California, but also you see all the antitrust and hearings and investigations on Amazon, on Google, on Apple happening in the US. I mean, this debate is now happening at the core of the California internet, of the origins of the internet. And in Europe, interesting enough, there is an interview today on the Financial Times to Angela Merkel, which I really suggest you to have a look and read, because she, you may like her or not, but she has some experience, and she rightly so says that we are at a turning point in Europe. Europe has to decide what it really wants to be, whether it be on the security, whether it be facing Brexit. And she also mentioned that about what is our role in shaping the evolution of the internet and what it doesn't work. So if we can cluster all these things together, and we can be, I think we have all the elements into different plenaries. If we can put them almost seamless together around the concept of sovereignty, and capturing into that what are the challenges, whether it be regulation, whether it be 5G, whether it be trade, whether it be innovation. They're all different phases of the same diamonds. We have to be smart in doing that, and in that we can also help to the overall goal of putting EuroDIG at the center of this debate. Because if we can do that, I'm sure that we can even get the attention of the Global Internet Governance Forum about this, and we can really overcome this almost sense of, well, in Europe it's only about regulation. It's only about whether Europe would be able to regulate or not. No, actually something more, and are we able to decide and shape and do something to shape the future of the internet, or we're just observing and fading in the background? If that can be put into, more concise, but it can put it into the theme and also into the main session, I think we strike a big goal.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Running to Jon.
Well, I don't think we have a Californian internet in Europe. We have the Irish internet, Meaning we have all that regulation in place and it's not enforced because all companies are sitting in Ireland, and in Ireland GDPR is poorly enforced yet. So it's not that we don't have the regulation, but well, it's not working, and this is basically what was one of the focus for the efficient regulation of platforms. Of course, this goes beyond GDPR, but GDPR is one important part of it.
Thanks, Jon. Giacomo?
As we have already discussed last year, last year we decided to put aside the GDPR as a main topic because we said it's done. But I told that it's not done, the GDPR. In reality, the GDPR game starts now when the first affairs will come into judgment at the privacy authority in Europe. So I think that if we want to talk about regulation on the platforms, this is the right moment to bring on the debate the regulatory authority of the privacy that have open action against the platforms, and to ask where they are and where this stands. Because everybody in the world is waiting to see if GDPR will be fully implemented or not. This is the crucial issue. If it remains a good law, very nice on the shelves, nobody will care. If it's something that shows to have teeth, then people start, even the bigger will start to take it seriously. So I think that if we want to touch this point, we need to do with the Association of the Privacy Authority around Europe and ask them to come.
Okay, thanks. Any other?
Okay, to summarize this category now, I hear there was no disagreement in merging the topic of the digital economy and regulation and the regulation of global platforms, but we have to formulate the right focus. We have to put more thoughts into that one. We didn't really speak about, with this other workshop, algorithms, competition and trust. There would be another point that I would like to raise. Last year, subject matter experts decided that the matter of artificial intelligence is not merely a matter of internet governance, and therefore we as the Secretariat try to avoid artificial intelligence as one of the main buzzwords in our headlines here, and we put it under algorithm, competition and trust, which of course then, if you go deeper into the topic, includes artificial intelligence. My question to you, is that an approach that we still would like to follow? Because last year again we made that experience that when it comes to the focal point level and to the org team level, then the matter of artificial intelligence pops up immediately, and it was not possible to explain each and every time that, hey guys, artificial intelligence is an emerging technology that we are looking at, but not the one. And the question is how we are going to deal with it, or do we put it into some title inviting those who want to speak about artificial intelligence, because then it would be here possibly most likely in this category.
Well, there are quite a few people that equate algorithms to artificial intelligence. Is a Google search engine an actual artificial intelligence when it actually manages to find what you want, and then you look at another search engine, it doesn't actually necessarily put the right what you're really looking for at the very beginning. The reason why Google is so useful to people, and most people use it, is because it seems to be giving them better results than others, or at least the perception is that you get better results with Google than with others. So obviously there's some kind of an engine behind it that is AI.
Jon?
You've done some work on that.
Well, personally, I don't like the name algorithm, because it's not an algorithm. It's the exact contrary, but it's heavily used. So AI is not really precise either, but at least it's not wrong. But anyway, we can name it however we like. There has been a couple of proposals concerning AI or deep learning, or deep learning is actually precise, and human rights, and I was kind of missing them. And I don't care whether they will be at emerging technology or whether they will be at human rights, but we should make sure that they are not lost. Because I think it's an important aspect.
Okay. Maybe we revisit this issue when we come to your category.
Can we cluster these with what we have here? So it would be AI, competition, trust, and human rights. As in, is artificial, because these are three aspects really of artificial intelligence. Does it bring trust? Does it bring competition? And does it respect human rights?
But Olivier, I promised that that is going to be a workshop where yabba yabba blah 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 takes place.
As I said, I'm not going to be in that workshop, so it's not going to be yabba yabba.
Yeah, but that's the point. I think we have to be very specific on what we want to discuss, because of course you...
I get your point. Okay. Just thinking about different aspects or leads.
Another question. Or let's go to the remote participant first.
Andrew, please take the floor.
Thank you. Just very briefly, if you want to make it obvious that it's to do with AI as well, I would simply extend the title to be Algorithms, Machine Learning, Competition and Trust. Because I think algorithms aren't really AI, but they're important, but they're distinct and separate. They both, but I've not read the proposals. I'm just making that as a general observation.
I heard machine learning and deep learning. What would be more precise?
Machine learning is broader, but usually it's only deep learning.
I'll pass the mic to you.
Unless we have other machine learning things there, which will go for deep learning, because it's mostly deep learning.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I think the key thing is to say some form of those words alongside the algorithms piece.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
With this, can we skip algorithms, or do we need to keep algorithms if we have deep learning?
Maybe keep the algorithms, although I don't like them. Many people refer to them, so they find it there.
Okay, so we are in agreement. We keep something that covers algorithm, deep learning, competition and trust, which is still very broad and has to be focused a bit more by looking at it into more detail. Okay, and then my last question to the smart cities.
Well, wait.
Yeah?
The focus is, do they bring competition or do they hinder competition? Do they bring trust? Do they hinder trust? Two questions.
Okay, but we have to formulate the title a bit sharper then. Smart cities, is that something that we would like to keep? The proposals that are mentioned here are not the strongest one, I must say. I mean, they were not very descriptive, or is that something where you would be okay in case we are going to skip it? But because we have too many workshops at the moment, we have to condense it a bit.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I thought that they might fit with 5G because it's part of the 5G thing. Maybe rather than being part of 5G, there could be just a mention of the smart cities. But I know that there are also other ideas, as in, no, smart cities exist today. So it does sound like it would be a repeat of some of the 5G discussions as well.
Okay, okay, so we keep them under. Michael Ocher?
I just wanted to say that I think it's going to be really, regardless of what we name the session, which whatever, I just want to say, with my dynamic coalition on the sustainability of journalism and news media hat, obviously this is an innovation economic issue, but if we're talking about competition, trust, algorithms, and all forms of AI, that's very much a media issue as well, especially as it relates to disinformation, to the sustainability of journalism, specifically in Europe. So I would be really keen to make sure that while we're finalizing that, it's very, very clear what elements of competition we're referring to, and kind of keep that scope rather focused. Because as you said, Sandra, I think it would be easy to have that be kind of so inclusive of all these different issues that the workshop itself doesn't really even end up knowing what specifically to talk about, if that makes sense. I can clarify if that's not clear.
It could be a 6-hour workshop.
Yeah. definitely. Michael, thank you very much, and I also would like to confirm that we received your email requesting a dynamic coalition for the dynamic coalition on the sustainability of journalism and media. We come to that category later on, and since we are always in support of giving dynamic coalitions a platform to meet at the regional IGF, I more or less would like to confirm already that you got this space on day 0, where we also know now that some of those proposals can go under it. Okay, then I would like to finish with this category and move to the category of human rights. Jörn is the subject matter expert.
Just, Sandra, just a quick question then. What about the issues, the gender issue and the addiction issue? Could these be flash
We
or
are dealing
not?
with the flash sessions on a separate...
We do it after,
This
okay.
is a separate process.
All right, go.
Today we concentrate on workshops and plenaries and everything else that follows.
Understood. All right, thanks.
So Jörn was taking over this category after Farzaneh did it for a long time, but since she is based in New Jersey and also took a new job, she was happy to hand it over to someone. So Jörn did it in cooperation with the Council of Europe that also had a stake in that, right? Or at least
we exchanged some emails, but first, concerning the global platforms, when we merge it with the digital economy, there are some topics that are a bit more GDPR specific, and maybe we could have, well, we have currently we have a workshop entered in the plan to with the question: do we need to rethink GDPR? GDPR versus information freedom, the future of consent. There's a lot of discussion on consent doesn't really work. We need something different. And I think we could maybe have this also as a plenary. If we skip one plenary over there, because we merge the two platforms. Because I think it's the other very important topic in that domain. Otherwise, we have data protection in the SEE countries. GDPR has certain obstacles for countries that are third countries. And these countries have a lot of problems concerning well, their goal to catch up with Europe, with Europe's regulation, and at the same time being considered equally protective to data. So I think this is quite a good workshop topic. And then we have the decentralized digital identity, a topic which is gaining a lot of attention, and so I think it's good to have it there. We already talked a bit about the protection of data relating to children and education, and I understood that we move it, especially the education part, and we let me see. We had the part of how to align AI with human rights that I just mentioned, that I would like to have maybe as a flash session or as a, well, probably not as a workshop, because we don't have too many workshops available, but I think it's an important part. Then we also had the diversity trends on platforms and their impact. Questions. We have female platforms where we have a majority of female users, and is it a good thing to have platforms that have no equal representation, or is it a bad thing? Should groups have their own platforms, or what does it mean? So it might be an interesting topic to merge with the women topic that we just had before. And one thing that has been dropped was governance of decentralized platforms. Something from which was listed on the IG ecosystem. I think it's a very interesting and innovative topic. And we had the topic of disconnect between tech scientists, developers, and politicians. And we talked this morning about how we can overcome this disconnect between EuroDIG and politicians and politics. And maybe it's a kind of a meta topic that would be nice to address in some way. To see how all this discussion and this knowledge that is available can really have an impact in decision making and regulation. And we see this disconnect that is making things more difficult. I think I covered everything. Yes, I think so.
Thanks, Jon. You have seen that we dissolved some of that we put together some of the proposals already, and you reminded me that the educational thing went into the building digital skills, education, creating curricula, so we saved one. And you proposed one that you would rather see as a plenary than a workshop. Which one was that?
The question of do we need to rethink GDPR?
GDPR.
So we kind of have a GDPR now for 2 years, and it's time to take a step back and see what worked, what didn't work, what was too much, what was too little, and discuss this.
Okay. Floor is open. You need coffee, huh? Urië. And then Valentina.
Just one thing about GDPR. I think that one of the unintended consequences was what happened for the WHOIS. And now, of course, ICANN, basically most of the oxygen in ICANN has been taken out by this effort to somehow devise a system whereby that WHOIS type of information would still be available, at the same time respecting GDPR, so that at least if we are taking GDPR, are going to take GDPR in a sort of a new sort of talk about that. So this definitely would be one of the aspects. Thank you.
Could you give it back to Valentina, please?
Yeah, tell me about it. The WHOIS discussion. No, I was wondering how many plenary do we have until now already?
We proposed already 4 plenaries, but one is under other, which goes together with climate. I will come to that later. We have 4, and basically all 4 are kind of reserved.
So for me, yes, I agree. Maybe we should do a sort of impact assessment or evaluation of the GDPR, but I don't think that deserves a plenary, to be honest. It can go under regulation. That's my opinion. And secondly, if Ireland is not implementing the GDPR, it's open to infraction, because the GDPR is regulation. So
What did you say?
Because you said Ireland, many companies are based in Ireland, because then they can go away, but then they're risking a lot, because it's a regulation. It's not a matter of waiting to implement at some point. It should be immediate.
Let's stop this discussion.
No, sorry. But nevertheless, yes, I think in general we can do this assessment, but not in a plenary, and certainly not all around the WHOIS, because otherwise, yeah, that's a bit too specific. Okay, that we need to be focused, but.
When the Secretariat was looking into these proposals, we were also thinking about things that we heard in the past, that, for instance, it would be interesting to hear about some court cases that have been taking place around GDPR, and that would also probably be something more for a workshop, where possibly a prosecutor can come, let us know what are the obstacles, how difficult is this law to fulfill, and these kind of things. Giacomo, you want to say something?
Court cases we are not at the time of the court cases yet. We are at the time where the authority of privacy have to pronounce on certain claims against the application of GDPR. This is the focus of this year. The court cases will be, I think, next year or in 2 years' time, because the time of the justice are long on this kind of things. So I repeat what I told before. I think that we need to invest the authority of the privacy in Europe, and as Valentina was trying to say, it's not anymore a matter of the single country, because when an authority of privacy in a country is not enough equipped to deal with a certain topic that happens in his country, they will be supported or even, I would say, overlooked by other bigger authorities. And there are already cases for that are going on. And I think that will be very interesting to open the debate with them, and we need to involve the European Data Protection Authority and the Authority of the Privacy around Europe, the ones that are already working on this.
I think you just qualified as focal point for this. But you would be okay with a workshop or instead of a plenary? What would you?
Big fish for a big mic?
No, simply, it's too early to decide today. I think that if we are able to get the right names, we would deserve a plenary.
Difficult to... Okay, Peter.
Thank you. Just opening the scope a bit in a way that we might want to, I'm not going to sit down. We might want to have plenaries for the next and the next after the next year. And I very much agree with the assessment that it's probably too early to make a judgment about court cases and the really crispy and hard issues. So it's probably helpful if we don't block the next or the 2020 plenary by having this in a plenary this year and then potentially being repetitive in the next years. Mm-hmm. And obviously the workshop seems to be fine, although I don't think the title is the right one. It's like putting this under pressure. We need to rethink GDPR. I know that's like a teaser in a way, but the state of privacy in Europe would be something that's probably a bit more neutral, to the extent that people conceive privacy as neutral. But the rethinking is going into that it's already setting the scene that something is going wrong there. And there might be things going wrong, but I think there are also lots of things going right. Mm. So.
You have a proposal for a different formulation already?
Yeah, State of Privacy in Europe as a working title.
Well, state of GDPR is boring, sorry. So we need a more catchy title. And it's not just that it's not effective, but in some cases it's overreaching. So it's threatening information freedom. So it's... Yep.
I just have a proposal. I just have a proposal of like a well thought, maybe, I don't know, privacy 3.0 or something in Europe or something like this. Like the next steps or like the future of privacy in Europe, something like that. I think that would be more positive title.
So, no, you were...
Let's go to a remote participant first, Andrew.
Hi, sorry, just coming off mute. Given that we've already discussed the proposal for the other plenary, which was regulating the European digital economy, I would have thought that ought to be sufficient, and maybe taking the relevant pieces, if it needs to be in a plenary session, inserting the relevant bits on GDPR into that would make more sense than having two separate plenaries on regulation. Otherwise, it's starting to send quite a negative message about, I think, was it Valentina suggested, you know, there's more than just regulation to technology in Europe. It'd be unfortunate to get the impression that it was different to that.
Okay, this is Peter again. Just to respond to Jörn. Yeah, I agree there might be overreach. There's also a lot of fear-mongering, and there's also a lot of lack of enforcement. So it's going in various directions, and maybe we can't catch that in a title, but then again, design by committee for a title is probably not the best
for
approach.
a title, I catched privacy in Europe dash GDPR versus information freedom for the moment. Very fragmentic, so it's not a final one.
No, I still think it's a very interesting discussion, but I still wouldn't do it at plenary. Sorry, Giacomo. But we have a lot of very interesting topics, it seems to me, this year for plenaries. And this will be a very interesting discussion, certainly, but so very autoreferential, because we're not going to do a refit of GDPR anytime soon. So it's not going to be informing really for now anything. And the second thing is, yeah, in general, overreaching or not effective, probably both true. But since you mentioned yourself, Sandra, maybe also do not forget comparison with others. I don't know if it can fit in the same session, but a comparison with other framework would be interesting, like the California one, but also others that are copying or not copying the European one. Now, since you're the focal point, Giacomo, it's up to you to take it on board or not, this suggestion.
Okay, so I think there is consent in this room that to deal with the GDPR, whatever the title is, in a workshop. I didn't hear any opposement against decentralized digital identity. I must say this is also something that one stakeholder group, the CCTLDs, would be quite interested in, although they are not very active in submitting proposals, they are active in giving money. And for instance, the DENIC, EuroDIG, Switch, they are all looking into how to first reach the end user, but also developing tools on managing digital identity. So that might be a workshop, and Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, that might be a workshop that attracts CCTLDs a little bit more, that are looking into these kind of things. You're looking like you doubt what I say.
No, I'm just looking confused as usual.
Okay, I didn't want to put a spot on you. My question to all of you now, and in particular Jörn, is this how it looks at the moment? Is this still in a way that it makes sense to you, or did we change it too much? Is it, I can enlarge it a little bit. We have 3 workshops basically, and one plenary, or one aspect that is merged with the plenary on a digital economy regulation. This is how we would cover this category.
Yeah, well, I still got the governance of decentralized platforms, which I think is, well, I don't know, you want to move it to a flash session? Or?
I think it's here in securing and data protection in C region in relation to EU regulation. I think
this has nothing to do with it. Governance of decentralized platforms.
Ah, of decent. Sorry.
Sorry, we misunderstood.
Then I missed. Possibly it went into the digital identity, but because we have the decentralized there.
Okay, we could have as a workshop. Maybe we have enough time to put both in them. Okay.
Yeah. Do you think that's doable?
Mm-hmm. And then we had the AI and human rights part. Since we didn't merge them, we should give them some spot.
It went into the algorithm, deep learning, competition trust thing. Those proposals went in there.
It's under economic issues.
Yes.
But human rights are not economic issues there.
They are not excluded. This would be a merged proposal which has 2 colors, basically.
Okay. I thought we had a kind of a discussion that it was too broad and we didn't want everything in one workshop. But well, if you want to merge it, then. But
for this category economy, it seemed to be resolved to me. If you now say that's too broad, then we have to find other ways.
Maybe if there is something very specific, maybe we add another flash session to cover that thing that might not be identifiable anymore in the merged session.
For flash sessions, we have nothing so far, and here there would be enough space to do something.
Okay.
But you don't have something specific in mind now, a headline that you could give us?
For the human rights and AI, let me see, it was... Well, discuss the ways in which we can educate algorithms and AI with human rights principles, how AI will help and risk human life, and
okay.
The appropriate standards that match very well with the economic issues. That maybe this is
Let's
fine.
go into the details of the proposals later on.
Okay.
Okay, is this it for this category on human rights, or any other questions? I have the feeling you're getting tired. Then let's shift, any online interventions? No? Then let's shift to our almost last category, which is media and content. And this is clustered by Uri Puro. I enlarge it for you a little bit.
Okay, before going to this category, I just want to make a general observation after this stage of the discussions, which have been very productive to my mind. It seems that we have a few elephants in the room. There are like 4 elephants at least, and they are not European. And these elephants have been present before, but now we are more and more sort of knowledgeable, aware of their presence. And of course, what I'm talking about are Google and Facebook and so on and so forth. And it's interesting that somehow these elephants are lurking behind every category and every cluster, one way or the other. We see some parts of them, like, you know, the elephant and the 5 blind men who saw different aspects of the elephant. Anyway, so I think that even so, we have managed to make this sort of clustering, grouping quite well, using the categories which actually we have inherited from the original IGF and original WSIS even. Okay, so the clustering of proposals for the media and content this year. There were 20 proposals for the category, and most of them concerned the social media, like so many years before. And taking a look at them, first of all, a category copyright or cluster copyright. I think that it's a fairly clear-cut continuation of the discussion we had 2019, when all these scars of the big fight were still there. They were fresh. Now this directive is in force, and it will be implemented in less than a year from the EuroDIG, and there are 3 such proposals on that from credible sources. We have the WAN, IFRA, and we have the IFLA, the International Library Association, and I think that that's going to be one fairly compact category for a workshop. Asking how is it going now? Are you going to implement these and what problems you see, and so on and so forth. The second one is it's a new topic, at least in EuroDIG context. Also, I would remember that we had once it in IGF many years back, and that's Internet and diaspora, Internet and migration. of course, migration is one of the big political topics in Europe now, as everybody knows, in most countries, and it's an interesting aspect to what is the role of the internet there in a positive and negative aspects. This is a proposal from Marina Rosca, University of Deusto. Deusto is in Bilbao, Spain, and I intend to try to exchange some ideas with her and find out more in detail how she thinks that this topic could be treated. Third, social media. Most, as I said, most proposals were again about social media, and most were of the negative aspects of social media. Trying to cluster them somehow, I felt that perhaps we could talk for a change of some of the social media positive aspects, and I have a few proposals for that. I think that what Sandra just mentioned, Michael's proposal about sustainability of media, of content, would fit in this category also. Last, of course, most of these social media proposals were again about disinformation and other negative forms. We have been treating them at many EuroDIGs so far. I think that to avoid a repeat performance, we should focus on what is new threats, like, for instance, deep fake technology that now seems to be coming, and perhaps deep fake demonstration, actually demonstrating the latest possibilities on screen of what you can do with deep fake technology would be a possible interesting session and a sort of visual session. There are some proposals concerning also new legislative and regulative approaches, but perhaps they could also go under other categories, as we have been discussing. Last, there were a few proposals about vulnerable groups, that to say children and old people, and what the idea of this proposal of old people is somebody over 50 years. But anyway, we all are terribly vulnerable. But I think that this, as it has been already proposed here on the screen, this problem with children, young people, and even old people could be treated in another category. Thank you.
Thank you, Uriyo. Questions, comments? Yeah? Andrew, our remote participant, very active one. Andrew, you have the floor.
Andrew, yes, please.
Thank you. Just two observations based on what's been said, which were the national implementation of copyright. Would that be possible to incorporate within a regulating the European digital economy session? Just a thought. And similarly, the whole piece on disinformation and deep fakes and so on, could that be linked with the session we talked about on algorithms, deep learning, competition and trust? Because to me, that's a key facet of trust fundamentally, and a good demonstration of deep learning as well, in a bad way. So just two suggestions if you wanted to squeeze up the number of workshops.
Yeah, that's fully possible, of course. But I'd like to have these deep fakes as a visual demonstration. Whether that would be standalone or part of another workshop, that's of course could be decided.
I understand deep fake, a presentation as is, that would be something for the plenary room, right? Something where you really demonstrate how it works, how it looks, how amazing it is. It's a good idea. I take that to a standalone topic because this is not yet there. We would. Pardon?
How to do it yourself on day 0.
That could be also something.
Please take the mic.
Yeah, I think that by June there will be available from various sources good examples and good demonstrations on how it can be made.
Olivier, the mic is with Uriel.
Yeah, thank you. This year I attended the Mozilla Festival in London, and they had a demonstration of deepfakes. So it was a little workshop, a little round table, and there was a chap on the computer, and he took a few pictures, and he said, right, have a look at how I create a deepfake like this, and he created it within 10 minutes or something. We had a deepfake created in front of us, so it was really interesting, and it was well attended. Now whether it can be recreated in a plenary with lots of people, well, you know Murphy's Law, don't you? So you're going to do the thing online, do it, and 20 minutes later it's still not finished, and it's a tough one. So, yeah.
Hi, Chris Buckridge. I was just going to note, and again, so we're possibly digging down into the dirt a little here, but certainly in terms of, well, the US election sharpening a lot of people's minds about these kinds of issues and about sort of misinformation and how the internet can actually affect democratic processes, there's probably going to be other aspects. I think Cloudflare yesterday announced that they'll be providing free protection to US political campaigns. So there is some other work going on. So I think the deepfakes thing is probably a very useful draw card and a very sort of good example of it. But we should also look a little bit more broadly at the sort of general other impacts that the internet can have on democratic processes.
Yeah, I think that this would be in a way a sort of consumer education. That is to say that to prepare for a time when many of the things that we have always believed in are not credible anymore. It's a hard job actually to tell people that what you see is not true.
Okay, I have a question to Uriel and to Michael Orja, who is online still and who proposed to have this dynamic coalition meeting on day 0. To which extent do you think the media proposals could go into the dynamic coalition on, what was the right name, journalism and sustainability of journalism and news and media? Michael, since you have the floor, please go ahead.
Sure. So to be very honest, Sandra, I hadn't thought about it that holistically. I was thinking of it more in the sense of for us as the dynamic coalition, the DC sustainability in very shorter terms, to be able to just meet, provide more of a, let's say, an informal gathering as opposed to a workshop in and of itself, more of a place to host anyone that's interested in media and content issues, or specifically sustainability issues as it relates to journalism, news media, kind of update everyone on our action plan for 2020 that we're currently developing, and basically just provide a space for anyone. So it wasn't specifically with the idea, with the intention to create, to I guess do something substantial, but that's not to say that we can't. We just hadn't been planning on it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it would be possible if you take up the disinformation on social media and how to fight it? Because I think that goes very much into the work of the dynamic coalition also.
Unfortunately, Sandra, I wouldn't be able to confirm now. I would have to check with the co-coordinators and also talk to some other people to see if that would be okay. So I'm so sorry. I don't have the ability to confirm yet.
Okay, point taken. I put it in as something that we should have to explore further.
Perfect. Thank you, and thank you for thinking of us.
Yeah, Michael, I have been lurking on the mailing list of the of your coalition, and I know the proposal you made for this the other conference. I propose that we talk about that offline and let's see if we can find some sort of cooperation points. Thank you.
You see, my aim is to condense it down a little bit. We have another one from remote, Nadia Chaya.
Nadia, want you to take the floor?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, I just want to comment on the deepfakes. In terms of the direction, I recall that some media organizations launched a manner in which they're addressing deepfakes, but also there is a new website that was open source, I think, in which they're teaching people how to create their own person. So you can actually create images of persons online. And I think the website is called This Is Not a Real Person. And then if you try to find this person's not existent, is created by itself. So that's so in terms of direction, whether or not we should go towards AI or towards media, I think it overlaps, and I think it depends on who ends up being part of that particular session on what direction it will go, unless you specifically say now that you want to go in a particular direction.
Okay. Uri, you want to respond?
Yeah, just thank you, Nadia. Can you send me the URL and I'll take a look at that?
That was a question to Nadia. This person does not exist. Is the URL?
Just the website.
Okay. Good. So for this category, I have the feeling that there's agreement on keeping the national implementation of copyright, because that's really an ongoing issue. We are a bit unsure how we are treating the social media and positive and negative aspects and so on and so forth. And I understood that aspects of vulnerable groups, children and elderly people goes in this educational part that we all clustered under literacy, right? Good. This brings us down to almost 16 workshops that we would need. Are there any other comments or questions on the media category? I'm rushing a bit now because we are on top of the hour. Okay, if this is not the case, then I would now go back to the overall program before we go into the break. So I adjusted already as the information came in today. So what's new compared to the morning is that we have, oops. What is new at the moment, that we have another dynamic coalition, the one on sustainability of journalism, news and media. That would possibly make it between 2 or 3 dynamic coalition meetings on day 0, as well as the NRI assembly. Valentina already confirmed that the Commission is planning to do the HLIG meeting on day 0 as well. That would mean possibly the open part in the morning, the closed part in the afternoon, which would not overlap too much. Then we heard from Mattia Fantinati that he might do a ministerial meeting on day 0. And we are also trying to get in the German government with recommendation A and B. That makes it quite I think we need another day. we really have to look into detail how we can accommodate all this, or if we can even accept other pre-events, because that's already too much, I would say. Let's look into this a little bit more in detail. Then on day 1, we had mutual agreement that the plenary 1 on G5 is kind of the opening plenary. And we also discovered that digital sovereignty should become a plenary and should be somehow connected with the G5 discussion because it interferes. So I would propose now to do it on one day. Plenary 1 in the morning, before noon, and plenary 2, digital sovereignty, in the afternoon, where we have space to have keynotes around those plenaries. And we have a very clear track on governance issues on day 1. And on day 2, this is something that we have not yet spoken about. The Secretariat proposes, since we got aware that there's a conference going on in parallel at ICTP that deals about climate change and climate issues, we were proposing to explore opportunities to do one session together with this community. This would help us to connect to a totally new community, and we would possibly cannot follow our rules or impose our rules on those people, but we could try to see if we organize something, I don't know what yet, at the moment it's called plenary, together, because it should be, of course, one of the big rooms where the two communities meet. We do have some proposals that go into the direction of climate and sustainability, but it was not a focus so far. But since we have that opportunity with this parallel conference, I would really like to propose that, and I see a lot of thumbs up in the audience, so I think we find out with the hosts how we are going to go together, and if we might have to adjust, we might use the lunch break or whatsoever, what's possible. This would be a next step. And then the fourth plenary that was proposed is this, where we still don't have the right title, but where we put together efficient regulation of global platforms, the digital economy and regulatory aspects, but we have to think about the title, but a lot of proposals went into that. This is it at the moment on the plenary side. We would then have space for 16 workshops. But first of all, I would like to ask you if you in principle agree with those changes in the program structure. Auke does not agree. Auke, take the mic, please. Where's the mic? Ulrike has the mic.
Yeah, I was thinking, would it be interesting to explore the opportunity to add workshops besides the plenaries, to make more workshops available, and if people are not interested in a plenary session, they can go to other workshops?
I would say no for two aspects. First, we are already increasing the number of workshops from 12 to 16. And to be honest, the capacity of the Secretariat is limited in this regard. And also the capacity of the community to organize more sessions in a good quality. And secondly, I don't want to end up with another empty plenary room.
That's clear.
Giacomo here, just take the mic.
Thank you. No, my question is, in this scheme, where you see the intervention of the personalities? We have to fit into the plenaries, or we will create other space out of the plenaries?
The blue parts, the keynotes.
Yeah, but the keynotes are related to the topics, while some of the people that, for instance, this morning he mentioned that the Minister Pisano want to come to present his plan for digitalization of Italy. This is very loosely related to any of this topic, but if she asks for that, where we will put it.
Yeah,
but I want to be sure that
into the welcoming. I mean, we are in Italy. Of course, we want to learn what's going on in Italy. That would be a perfect topic for the welcoming. Also, the State Secretary of the Netherlands did the same last year. I don't think this.
But any other personality that doesn't fit into the topics, then we will not accept. I think that we need to find, to leave a space somewhere if we have somebody asking to come and willing to come, no?
Do you have some concrete ideas in your mind who and what issues they would talk?
Could be any. For instance, if the Digital Data Protection Commissioner of the European Union want to come, yes, would be good in a workshop, but probably he will not come if he's only for a workshop. While if he is, let's say, hypothetically, is available, you have to, it's good to have flexibility to say, yes, you come to the workshop, but you can also address this specific point. It's an example.
Yeah, but I mean, we need to be aware we can't have 20 keynote speakers. So if one or two come, then we may probably find a space for them.
And Giacomo, we do have this plenary room where we have presenter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so we have a lot of space there. Chris?
Just to respond to that a bit, I mean, I think we do have a lot of keynote blocks there, so I'm looking at, I guess, four keynotes. So, I mean, I think that if there is something specific, we can probably fit them into one of those. Yeah. I mean, I think also, and this is the discussion we've had for many years, is the value of, you know, having high-level participants. I think one thing that last year's experience shows is that having a high-level participant doesn't bring more people to the event. And if it doesn't bring more people to the event, then it also damages the reputation in terms of those high-level people who turn up and have to give a speech to an empty hall. So, I mean, I think, yeah, we may get last-minute requests, but I think we also need to be thinking a lot more strategically than just saying, well, this high-level person would like to come and speak, so let's give them a slot, because I fear what we end up then with, again, is an empty room with a high-level person who we wanted to give a slot to, and that doesn't help us at all as EuroDIG.
And I also would like to emphasize that, I'm always pressing the wrong buttons here, that each of those slots, those keynote slots, consists of 2 times 15 minutes. I mean, they are 30 minutes long. That means we can accommodate 2 keynote speakers if we would like to, or we can also do an interview between 2 opponent opinions. And of course, even if it's not 100% related to the plenary that follows or that was before that, we could accommodate also such issues. But I agree with Chris. At the past, we rather had the problem to find enough high-level speakers, and I think we could deal with it on a case-by-case basis and find good solutions that work well.
Do we have also slots for flash sessions? Because I don't see them in the program.
This is a new element. The flash sessions now all went into the big plenary room, and I would suggest we find another name instead of flash sessions, because flash sessions, that's a format that was known at EuroDIG. I think we should call it presentation, fireside chat, something like TED Talk, but TED Talk we cannot use, but something like this. That makes it clear it is a presentation in the big room and can be 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I would refrain from using flash session because this was something very special at EuroDIG, and this we don't have in this form anymore, but we have something similar.
Okay, what's the choice of not making it a separate flash session?
The room, we have no other room.
Oh, no other rooms, okay.
So those new flash sessions, those new flash sessions will be the ones in the empty plenary.
And then hopefully full plenary. It's a sort of an experiment. We hope that with these hopefully hot topic interests, we get attention in the big room. It's also a logistical problem because the workshop rooms are rather small. There's one big workshop room with like 90 people, but the others are like 25, 30, 40 maximum if you stand. So we need the big room in order to accommodate all the people. So that's why we hope with interesting presentations, also from startups and so on and so forth, we can keep enough people in the big room that is a win-win situation, both for the presenter but also for those who are interested in short while entertainment, I would call it. Thomas.
Thank you. Just to share an experience with you, I was at an AI conference of the Council of Europe last February in Helsinki, where they had a format like this. It was quite a big conference, and they had slots where people had like 15 or 20-minute slots that were just coming in, and then the next, and then the next, and they were presenting their projects and their ideas, and that worked actually fairly well. And sometimes you just stayed for the next one to see what they're doing, and so on and so forth. And if they're interesting, and of course you need to have a list, people need to see, okay, this is this and this is this. So that is something that we could actually try, and it allows you to bring in other ideas. An alternative could be, and this is, I don't know if you plan to do this, if you ask people ahead when they register, which workshops are you intending to attend, that gives you a hint of how many people you have to expect in which workshop. And you could then think if one is significantly bigger than the others, in case you don't do the presentations in every slots, that for instance for the biggest workshops to give them the plenary room as workshops. So there are several ways to go with this, but actually this format of giving 15 to 20 minutes where people can present something in 10 minutes, have a few Q&As, and then the next is up, that actually was quite a nice experience for me as well.
And I can confirm I also had such an experience at a WebBit festival where also one after the other came in with firework. Of course we don't do firework here, but,
we can.
but it was really interesting. You just stayed somewhere not so interesting, but others were really exciting, and we hope to do that a little bit the same way. Valentina?
No, I just wanted to go back to the VIP issue of Giacomo, which we have every year, by the way. It comes yearly, this issue. So basically, I think we have 3 keynote, right?
Even more, we have the welcome, and the
welcome
welcome includes usually 2 to 3 keynotes. We have a keynote here, so this is also 2 keynotes because no one speaks 30 minutes, I hope. And we have...
Also the wrap-up in the first day could be...
Another keynote here and another keynote here, but each could be 2, basically. So we would have enough space for keynotes,
I
like
think so too.
6 or 8 keynotes.
Yeah, also because, I mean, Trieste this year, I think it will be a bit like Tbilisi 2 years ago. So June is a very busy month, unfortunately, for many of... For many VIP, and especially in this field, ICANN, blah, 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 there are many events. And yes, being realistic, yes, it is it's a very nice city, of course, but logistically speaking, it's not super easy to reach. So I think realistically, I don't think we will have 100 VIP, Giacomo. We will have a way to accommodate. And going back to what Chris said, yeah, running the opposite risk of not having enough people in the room is not a good idea.
Roberto raised his hand a while ago, and then I would give the floor to the remote participants. There are 2 that raised hand. Roberto?
Two comments, maybe connected. First of all, we were talking at one point in time to have some keynotes from the fathers of the internet, quote unquote. We are working on this. Is this still going to take place in the keynotes, or?
We have the keynotes, and we would also be able to use the evening before.
Okay, so we continue this.
Yeah.
Okay, because we have already a couple of.
We can. This is also a format that we could do in the main plenary room instead of 3 short interventions.
No, that was
bigger.
just. The second thing is that talking about the climate change and so on, it makes sense to have that in the plenary if we manage to connect with the other conference. On the other hand, if we don't manage to connect with the other conference, I don't know how feasible that is because I'm not involved in that. But if that doesn't work, it would not make sense to use a plenary for the 4 or 5 sessions that are clustered in climate and digitalization. So maybe we can be flexible when we go on. If we see that this doesn't work, we may be flexible to sort of promote, quote unquote, something in the main space, in the plenary.
Absolutely, that's possible. We will see how successful we are in finding focal points and defining certain topics, and then we could indeed promote some workshop to a plenary, and maybe even a certain group of people would like to meet with those people, and then it goes to a workshop room. But honestly, I think it's a great chance for us to connect with another new community. That would be my preferred option.
Of course, if it happens, but if it doesn't. My overarching question is what flexibility do we have between now and the end of February?
Full flexibility.
Okay.
Rainer.
Can we give the floor to Andrea Beccali, please?
Thank you, Reinhard. And I wanted to pick up on something that Chris said about inviting high-level speakers for keynote and then running the risk of having an empty or an empty room, which indeed happened. And I agree with you that having the big names doesn't per se guarantee you more attendance. There is a caveat here, and it's something that I think it's time for us to reflect upon. And it's the communication and it's the promotion that we have to do of EuroDIG. And if we want to attract big names, and I think it is the time, and the topic is there, we also rethink how do we do our communication, and probably we need to invest in that. Probably we should, take a look on a PR agency or someone which is aware of which are the best ways to promote a similar event. And we never did something like that in the past, and I think it is time. And speaking from being Italian myself and having the conference in Trieste and all the efforts that the local stakeholders and the host puts in that, I'm personally even more motivated to invest into something like that. And we saw in Berlin, for instance, how much. You for those of you who were in Berlin, you would see billboards at the metro stations with the IGF. Of course, they had a different budget, but we should dedicate some time also on this part, because I think where we are not very good is to get our message out to the people that have no real direct interest into internet governance and who participate and work in this realm, but nonetheless they're very interested in those topics. But if you don't read on newspapers about EuroDIG, if you don't read, and we have two journalists, and Giacomo and Julio, you have experience in that. If you don't hear the radio, if you don't see that happening, then putting big names by there can be actually a boomerang. You can run a very meager event where you have the big name speaking to an empty room, and we don't want that. So I hope we will have some time, if not now, otherwise online, to dedicate in that, and even consider this proposal to invest and contract an agency that can help us in doing that.
Okay. Second intervention from remote. And then Thomas, and then we have, because we are running already over coffee break, and
it's Andrew now.
Hi, thank you. Just a very brief intervention. Looking at the structure that you had for day one, with the two plenaries on 5G and digital sovereignty, as a suggestion, I would flip the order of those and suggest start with digital sovereignty as a sort of overarching theme, and then lead on to 5G as the second of the two plenaries, rather than the way that it's shown. But that's merely a suggestion.
Thanks, Andrew. Possibly not doable, because it's the focus. The 5G is the focus of the host, so we have to give due diligence to the host. So I think that's That's it. Easy answer.
Fair enough.
Okay, Thomas and Auke, do you have something short or? First Thomas, then, because coffee break is waiting.
Okay, I tried to be brief. Two remarks. One about the fathers of the internet. I've heard them now so many times that I'm a little bit doubtful whether it makes sense to, unless they have something new to say. But the more and more the issues get away from the classical internet issues, the value added is questionable to me at least. Then on the climate and sustainability issue, I think this is one of the topics that is also rising in importance and attention, also with the whole climate discussion. You have action plans at the EU, we have this issue at home, others too, and that would be something new, so we should really try to make that link. So that's my message. And I will not say something about VIP, and PR exercises, we can discuss this in the coffee break.
Okay. Okay, now you between...
I'll make it short. Now, I really like the opening part in Georgia about the Tuchimi project, and I hope that we can also make a connection here at the opening or whatever to a local issue or something with a local community, like Andrea also said, to make it a really valuable experience also here.
Absolutely, this is the plan, and we spoke also to our Georgian friends already. They are aware, and ISOC had a conference in last November about, so we are in a process of keeping that up and bringing it further. So I would suggest you can use the coffee break now to discuss further the program structure. After this, we will have a final look at this matrix, not this one, I update the one. So in order to know where we are now, in order to get agreement and consensus on that. And if we then still have time, we would be happy to present you a short snapshot for our new website. We are not asking for your democratic decision. Websites and buildings should not be done in a democratic way, but we would like to introduce you what we are planning to do and maybe get some ideas, some further ideas from you. I would suggest we have now coffee break until 4:45. Then we are only 15 minutes delayed. Coffee break is then only 25 minutes. And we will ask if we can do the gathering a little bit later. Okay, see you at 4:45.